Okay, so at this point, we are moving on from step 2, starting step 3. Right now, what your website should look like is this. And if you view source, it should look very much like that. That's where we're picking up from. You might have made some changes. We might have some differences, but this is where you want to start from. All right, groovy. So you should have your browser open. And I always like to do this when I'm on a single monitor. Get myself set up. I got brackets open, and I got my browser window so that I can Alt-tab between them and see what's going on, see what I'm doing. Today our goal today is to start building our menu in the top of the page and to start talking about some CSS. First of all, I'd mention, and you're going to learn in the lesson that goes along with this video that we'll put up, CSS has several layers in the way that it executes, it implements itself, and one can overwrite the other. And you'll learn that in the lesson. I won't go too deep into that right now. But you'll see a browser default, which actually applies some minimal CSS to a page if it has no CSS. And then we have several other layers of CSS. Right now, what we're using is the inline. In CSS, as we're going to learn, we're going to start tying into CSS now, is cascading style sheets. And as we mentioned the other day, it allows us to put color and paint the page. Basically, it is the paint, right? It's what lets you take that HTML that is just the wood framing and the wood siding on a house, and the CSS is what allows us to put the actual nice siding on, the nice front door, the landscaping around the house, the painting in the house, things like that, make it look nice. But we use inline styles, and we try not to, as you'll learn, we try not to use inline styles at all. And the reason we try not to use them at all is because of the fact that they're right there, meaning if we have to make changes, and you'll see we're going to make 18 copies of this page that we're making right now. Now, if we left background color gray and background color gray in the footer and in the header, and we went and we copied this page, we're actually going to copy this page to make our 18 pages. We're going to use this one page, and then we're going to copy it and kind of use it as a template to get our other pages made. So if we wanted to go change our background color, we'd have to go make 36 changes. Not that big of a deal if you have the right IDE, the right brackets is an IDE, right? It's basically a piece of software that we can use to create websites with, things like that, right? Because you have find and replace, and you can go in and find and replace in all 18 pages with one swipe. But even find and replace, as nice as that is, you're running a risk, right? You're running a risk of introducing error to your website, and it's just not efficient. It just doesn't make sense. So right now we have gray and gray, and it's right here and right here. What we want to do is be able to change that. Right now, if we wanted to change it to red, we literally would have to go to two places, change it in red, save it, come up here, and we have red. Not really an efficient way to work. So we're going to learn the next form that's right above inline, which is called embedded style sheets, embedded styles. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to go up in the head of our document, and we're going to type the style tags element. And in there, basically any of these, like these inline styles that we put in there, right, we'll tell it what to apply that color to, and it'll apply to the entire page, to anything in that page. So for example, what we're going to do is take this background gray out of the header. In our embedded styles, we have what's called a selector. There's basically three main big type selectors, and then there's many other ways to use selectors. We're going to talk about the three most common selectors that you see. One is the element selector, one is the ID selector, and one is the class selector. If this doesn't make sense to you, it will, especially as you do the lesson, look through the lesson, and we'll talk more and more about it as we progress in classes. But right now, what we want to do is the selector that we want is the header. And if you take that style, that inline style, out of the header, and you save and you go and look, you'll see that we lost the gray in the header, right? So I'm going to come up here in my embedded style sheet, and I'm going to put header. And I'm going to close it in curly braces. And basically what I'm saying is anything in between these curly braces should be applied to the header. And we're going to just put that background color gray code that we had. In styles, this is known as the property, right? So background color is a property of something, and this is the value. The gray is the value. If I hit save now, and I refresh, my header's right back to gray again. Now let's say that we want to do it to the footer too. You don't have to do this step because I'm doing this step as an example, and then I'm going to do something a little different. But what I'm doing is I'm putting in here footer gray, and actually what I'm going to do is footer red to make an example. And I'm going to hit save. And follow me here. Don't look at your computer. Follow me, because I'm trying to make teach a point here. HTML is read from top down. Styles from top down. JavaScript, when you learn JavaScript, from top down. Most languages are, right? It's read from top down. So if you see I put red in here, I identified the footer. It's correct, right? It works the same way as the header, but it's red. The reason that it's not applying is not really that it's not applying. It is applying, right? When the DOM is built inside the browser, when the browser is reading it, at this point of the read, it's red. But when it gets down to here, it's reassigned. So in other words, because of the fact that this declares the property of background color is supposed to be red, right? It says, okay, footer's red now. It gets down here and it sees, oh, you have an inline style. Oh, it's background color. You're overwriting this instruction up here. Hence, then it makes it gray. So if I come up here and I refresh, I'm still gray, right? The minute I take the style out of here, and I don't even have to take the style attribute out. The minute I take the style background color, the property background color out of it, and I save it, it's no longer overwritten by that inline style, and now it's red. This stuff is fundamental and very important to understand, because you'll chase your tail if you don't, right? If you don't get that concept of the overwriting of things and stuff like that, trust me, even 20-some years into this, sometimes I forget to consider that. And I'm trying to fix something, and I'm fixing it in the wrong place, right? Because I'm not paying attention to the fact that there's a hierarchy in how it's processed, how the information is processed. Now I could take this and I can make this gray, and I can save it, and I can come up here, and that's beautiful. But it's kind of silly when you're writing code, you're trying to keep your code to the least amount as possible, correct? Right? You're trying to keep it consolidated, compressed, and have minimal code. And also, it's more efficient to just say, hey, make the header and the footer gray. instead of saying, hey, make the header gray, hey, make the footer gray, right? So with CSS, what we can do is I can take this footer. I'm going to get rid of it. I'm being a little over the top, but I really just want to make the point instead of just making a change and being like, there you go, it worked, right? So I'm going to get rid of this footer selector in the style. It's not down in line. I'm going to refresh, and we lose the gray. Now what I can do is I can come up here and I can say header, comma, footer. So basically that's me telling the computer, I want you to apply whatever's in here to both the header and the footer. I'm going to hit save. Refresh, and there we are. Until you learn JavaScript, that is very important, right? And the reason I say that is when you learn JavaScript, you can move things around. But yes, the whole nesting of elements inside of each other, the whole using style selectors and using your styles correctly, you know, inline, or it's very rare that you should use an inline, but sometimes you just can't get around it, right? Sometimes you just, honestly, there's a level, it's hacky, we call it hacky. But if your client is screaming and you're on a huge website and you can't figure out where that background color is coming from, best thing you can do is, right, to appease the client, is go into the element, put the style attribute, overwrite that color, make them happy, and then go back and try to figure out what's going on. The problem is, even at places like eBay or even Amazon, the problem is you go and you do that, right? You fix it, the client's appeased, the fire's out, and another fire comes up. So now you end up with leaving it in there, and it's crappy code, right? It really is crappy code. Honestly, your HTML, theoretically, and with good reason, should just be HTML. It should not have any styles in it, do you know what I mean? Like built into the elements. The actual HTML making up the body of your page should just be nested elements, right, laying out the page. And to your point, as it reads from the top, yes, placement is very important. Placement's very important. Even as you know, and the more complex you get, the more important that placement is, because sometimes you'll put a piece of code into your page that will be dependent, we call it dependencies, on another piece of code. So if you put the piece of code that's dependent on, code A is dependent on code B, right? If you put code B after code A and you don't do it properly, it doesn't know where that code is because it hasn't been processed yet. It hasn't been brought in. Does that answer your question, sir? Cool. We're going to play a little with the style just so we can start to get a feel for CSS this morning. And one of the things we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and we're going to start to make our page look a little more like a page instead of a slinky, right, sitting there. And one of the things that we can do is we can go in here and we can say body. Now, when we say body and we apply style to the body, that style, unless overwritten by another style, right, applies to pretty much everything in the body. Meaning, if I come in here and I put color, which color is the font color, and I put red, and I hit save, it applies to everything in the body. So it's top down, right? So unless I put, now if I go to header and I say color green, and I save that and I refresh it, and actually it's header footer, sorry, but you see that it overrode it, right? Because that's a top down kind of thing. But in this case, it doesn't really, it gets a little confusing, and I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't want to, throw too much on your plate and confuse the crap out of you. But this would imply based on what I just said to you about, whatever it reads first, it is how it goes. But in this case, this is very specific. This is saying header, footer, and then this is saying body. So it's still going to stay that way because it's directly pointing at something. We do tend to write our CSS like everything else. You want to make it logical. You want to make it so it makes sense when you're going and looking for code. So of course the body tag is usually the first element in the visible document. So you start there. We'll go ahead and get rid of the color. Save it. And the world is back to normal. We'll go ahead and get rid of the green. Save it. And our header and footer is back to normal. So what we're going to do with our body is, first thing we're going to do is change the background color. If you see, you get these, it's nice. It gives you selectors, right? It'll list out the selectors available to you. And then, not the selectors, sorry, the properties. And now we're going to apply what's called a HEX Color. You'll learn about this in your lesson. You'll read more about it in your lesson. There's a couple different ways that we can apply a color, and you'll learn about RGB, HEX. I'm going to hit save. In DDD, when you think about it, when you're looking at HEX, right, basically what it's doing, it's covering 0 through F, and it's RGB. So the first value is the red, the green, and the blue. Whenever you look at something, it's really funny. Have you ever stood next to like a big Jumbotron or something like that? And the closer you get to it, you notice that it's like all these little red, green, and blue dots. But as you get further back, it makes a picture. Well, that's because essentially between those three colors, you can achieve any color possible, right? It's how you combine them together. And so those Jumbotrons, they're basically like an optical illusion when you think about it, because in reality, it's just a bunch of little red, green, and blue dots all over the place that make it. If you look at printed material, if you actually take, they call it a loop. One of the things I did in my career is I exchanged with a printing company. I took on a job there for about a half a year. And I told them that I would come in and work on their systems for them and their website. In exchange, that they had to let me work in a different department every day. And they had to give me a day where I could pick anybody. On a Friday, I could pick anybody in the company, and I could shadow them. Do you know what I mean by shadow? Right? Stand by them and watch. And it was great because I wanted to complete the pie. I do animation. I learned animation. I learned graphic design. I'm not, by no means am I saying I'm a graphic designer. I learned the principles and the technical, implementation and strategy of doing that. And I wanted to learn print design. And it was a very, I'm glad I did it. Because the funny thing is, when you look at printed material, if you put a loop on it or you magnifying glass and you really look at it, it's nothing but a bunch of little dots. It's nothing but a bunch of little tiny little dots. And everything around those dots in printing matters, right? We have things called rosetting and dot gain, and there's all these different things that make a picture look the way that it looks, and to get that crispness. And those UN Web, the web development course in the graphic design class, we touch a little on printing because it's important for you to understand when you're dealing with images and visual pieces, you should always start with print quality, because if you start with print quality, you can take print quality and you can always slim that down to web, right? But you can't take a web picture that's real small and send it to a printer and expect them to print it out on a poster. Because what'll happen, it'll get granulated, right? It'll just be real dotty. And we learn about those kinds of things and bleeding and stuff like that. But anyway, back to web. So we're going to change the background color. Hit refresh. And all I did was kind of gray up the background a tiny bit. Just put a hint of gray on the background. And then we have our section. And if you remember, our section is that part right in between. We put the section in between the header and the footer. And for now, we're kind of just using the section as a catch-all, and we'll actually use it more and more in a proper way. Again, we're just using things to break up our page and to have things happen. For our section, we're going to say we want the minimum height of our section to be 600 pixels. It'd be nice if I actually did the selector right. Section. I'm going to move this up in there. I got so excited. I'm going to save it. I'm going to come out here. And if you see, what it did is it pushed the bottom of the page down. It made this section 600 pixels high. And it's saying that's the minimum you can be. So if we have content in there and it pushes it to 1,000, that's okay, it'll show it. But we only have one line of text in there, and it's basically saying you will only shrink to 600 high. And the reason that we do that is a lot of times we have different elements in our HTML that we want to consume a specific amount of space because it'll look dumb if it doesn't, right? Because you might have a little bit of content in this one element to the left and more in the other to the right of it, and you end up with this offset kind of look to your page, where if you tell both of them, I want the minimum, your minimum height to be 600 or a specific height, it'll hold on to that height and they'll remain consistent. We also could just say we want you to be 600. We could take min out and just say I want your height to be 600. And at that point, we have different ways of dealing with the content if it extends beyond 600, but it'll stay 600. It won't change. Now at this point, I want to introduce the ID. And so in our footer, we're going to put a little tagline in the bottom of our footer. We're going to just do it with a div for now. And a div is an element that really is nothing more than a container, and it's used quite a bit. Divs, up until semantic elements, which we're starting to use, which is your header, your section, right? Divs have pretty much been the only, not the only, but the most widely used element to contain content in your web, in a part of your web page. And in the div, let's just put, yes, you have to put everything I do. I am 7 inches left of normal. Save that, and let's go look at it, and let's see how it looks. There it is. It's in the bottom of our page. And what we're going to do down here is we're going to add an ID. So this is an attribute, and the attribute is called the ID. IDs need to be unique. You can't have the same ID in the same page. You can have the same ID in multiple pages because we only look at one page at a time. But in this case, we're going to use footer tag line. The way that I just typed that, who can tell me what that is? The way that I typed that, the way that the text looks. No, what do we call that? Lowercase, lowercase, uppercase. I start each word after the first. There you go. Yeah, brother. Camel case. We call that camel case. Oh, boy. So we go out and we look at our page. I saved it. Nothing changed about it. It's still there. Nothing changed. So what I'll do is I'll take this ID though, and I'm going to go up here in my style sheet. And in my style sheet, we've learned that we can use an element as a selector, right? So the next thing we're going to learn that we can use, is an ID. And the way we let CSS know that we're pointing to an ID is we put a pound sign. And then we put the name. Footer, what do I call it? Footer tagline. Copy and paste is your friend. Trust me. Footer tagline. And so now with the footer tagline, if I go ahead and, because I've applied it to the ID, if I go ahead and I put in background color, and this time we're going to do it, and we're going to do it with black. We could use the name black. There's a bunch of names that CSS knows and ties right to a specific color. So we're going to make the background black, and while we're here, we're going to go ahead and make the text color white. And if you see, here's the example. Red, green, and blue, 0, 0, 0, meaning, right, no color, which represents black. FFF, so we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we have A, B, C, D, E, F. So if we save that, and we come out and we look at it, we can see down there in the bottom, right, that we have, it turned the background black and the text white. We'll do just a tiny bit more with that, and what we'll do is we'll do text align. And we're just going to center that. So text align allows us to center it. So it'll push it to the center of it. And while we're in here, we're going to do font dash weight. And we're going to tell it that we want it bold. So having applied text align center, font weight bold, I can go out and I can refresh after saving, and it moves it to the center and it makes it bold. We're going to do one last thing with that just because it bothers me and I'm anal. When we have a div, if I right click on it and I use inspect, this is something in Chrome I encourage you all to, start to get yourself familiar with this. Especially with the elements in here. And I click inspect, and I go over top my footer tagline in the DOM, right? This is the DOM that was created from our HTML. The browser went ahead and created the DOM from our HTML. We can see that it's what kind of element is it acting like? A block. Thank you. Who said that? Raise your hand, brother. Thank you. A block element. Our elements have things that are, they have a border, they have a margin, and they have padding. So a border is exactly what you would think it's going to be, right? It's the line around, the element. For this one, the line around the element, it's there, you just don't see it. It basically. So I kind of lied. It's not really there. It's there, but it's 0. The margin, meaning the outside the line, is 0 right now, and the padding is 0 right now. So if I were to come in here, just as an example, and I go in here, and this is one of the nice things about using this developer tool, and I come in and I find my style inside this DOM tool, and I say margin, and I'm going to be ridiculous about it, and I'm going to put 20 pixels. If you look at it now, as you can see, the gray is showing over here now. because what it's saying is, hey, put me here, and then 20 pixels around me, keep everything away from me. So it's inside that footer is gray. And so you see that 20 pixels, basically what it did here is it pushed it. It also pushed the text up as well, above it, right? If I change that to border, and say 20 pixels, and I give the border a color as well, you don't have to do this right now. I'm just doing an example. You're more than welcome to. I'm going to give it border color, and I'm going to give it red, and I'm going to give it the border style, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use dotted, and I'm going to back that border off to 4 pixels so that it makes a little more sense. And let's just go with solid. Now you see the border. That's the border of the element, right? That's the fence around the yard, let's say. Let's say the neighbor kids keep picking our flowers and stuff like that, right? So we basically go out and we tell them, you must stay 15 feet away from my fence. So the way that we would do that is we're basically saying, you stay away from the outside of my fence and 15 pixels for 15 feet. And you can see what happened again is we ended up with that, right? We can see the gray on both sides, the text pushed up a little bit. And we have a dog inside the fence, and we want that dog to stay 15 feet away from the fence on the inside. We use what's called padding. So if I put padding in, and I say 15 pixels, do you see how that opened? Do you see how it, like the text isn't up against the inside anymore? So we have margin border padding. Margin border padding. We have margin border padding on everything. What I did inside this tool, right? It's called developer tool. It's a console, and it lets you manipulate the DOM, which was created by your HTML. If I refresh everything I just did, gone. Why? Because when I refreshed, what it did is it took my HTML and reprocessed it, and so it rebuilt the DOM. Does that make sense? So the last thing I'm going to do there is in my footer, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put padding because I don't like the text slammed up against the parameter of the div on the, and so my padding, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just put in 12 pixels. Save it. I'm going to go out. I'm going to refresh, and that's good enough for now. Good? Everything is awesome. Yes. I can't get that song out of my head. Maybe it's because my son watches the Lego movie like 4 times a day. All right. So let's go start building our menu. Our goal with our HTML, right, is to get this first page done and get the fundamentals, meaning the menu, the footer, the header, right? Get these basic things done so that when we go to make our other pages, we can do it by just making a copy of this page. All right. So for our menu, what we're going to do is we're going to create something. We're learning this week about the nav, correct? And the nav goes inside the header, in our case. And so we're going to make a nav element. Oops. We're going to try to make a nav element. And what we're doing with the nav element is we're basically semantically telling the browser, telling search engines, telling whatever, what's inside of me is a bunch of links that are relative to my page and go to other pages within my site, or it doesn't always have to be within your site, but for us it's within our site. And we learned about lists. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by making an unordered list. And we have a couple different types of lists. When we open up a list, we tell a list that it's opening. We're saying, right, we're building an element. We're saying, here's a list. It's an unordered list, and we open it with UL, and we close it with UL. So everything in between the UL is what? In that element, in that tag, what are we putting there? List items, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with putting some list items in there. And we learned about, I believe we learned about anchor tags too as well, correct? So our anchor tags are for what? Pages. Right, they're links. And so we're going to open up our anchor tag, and then we're going to put, what is that called that I'm putting in here? An attribute, right? And we're using href, right? Because we're basically seeing a hyperlink reference to somewhere. And to start off with, what we're going to put in here is we're going after the top menu now. Building less the home tag is building this. That's what we're currently working on, is building this menu. Okay? Just so you have a visual to know where we're headed. So we're going to go in, and our first page that we're going to link to, we're not worried about home right now. It's not created yet, but we're going to link to our love.html page. And then we're going to close that anchor tag. So this attribute is a piece of information the browser is going to use to know what to do when it's clicked on. But it doesn't know what to display. So between the opening and the closing tag, we're going to use all lowercase in what we're doing here, and we're going to put love. We're going to hit save, and we're going to go out and take a peek at our, and see if it, and there it is. Now we're going to go ahead and, like any good coder would do, we're going to copy that. And the top layer is love who challenges you. That's the links along the top, right? So paste, paste, paste. And I can go who did I spell that right? Call me out on spelling if you see me spell something wrong. Love who challenges you.
I think there should be an E.
Right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Thank you. Please do not hesitate on correcting me on spelling. So we went down and we did that in the links, and I'm going to start moving a little faster with each step and try to, show you how to code and take those shortcuts whenever they're available. Like why type who? When you can type your down through, you could have done it over here, or you can do it inside the href. I decided to do it inside the href. Now I go through and I grab Control C, Control V. Challenges, Control C, Control V. U, Control C, Control V. Save. If I go out and I look at my page and I refresh, there's my list. Now, one of the things that we can do with lists is we can nest a list inside a list. Okay, so just like an outline, right? You'll be doing an outline and you'll indent, put a couple items. One of those items you might actually indent again and put a couple items. That's exactly what we're building here. And the way we do it, so we'll start with love. We have this list item, but we want to nest another list inside of it. So we come out here to the closing tag and we say, I want to put something inside of you. And then what we do inside that is we actually put an unordered list. So we're putting another unordered list inside this list, and we're going to go ahead and put the LIs. And what we want in here is, and at this point, honestly, I am perfectly fine if you copy this to your clipboard, right, that LI, because then at this point, what we can do is this. Things and people are what we're going for in here. So I can actually go things, people, peeps. I can save that, and let's go take a peek. And there you see, I have things and people indented, right? Oops. And if also I copied the wrong thing, by the way, and that shows you where the browser, I didn't include the closing LI tag on those two. Did anybody catch that? So make sure you close them. When you copy and paste, make sure you're copying and pasting good stuff. If you notice, the browser accepted it anyway, because the browser has a level of tolerance that it'll accept. You know, it kind of knows. And with tags, the browser will automatically just close tags. And the reason that it did it is it saw this opening tag, right? And it saw this content, and then it saw another opening tag, and it's like, oh, you must be closed, right? You must just be your own tag. So now at this point, what we can do too is we can actually just copy this whole list here, because we know that we're going to go down, and under who, we're going to put another nested list inside that list item under who. So I just pasted in what I grabbed from up there. Did that confuse anybody? And under who, we actually only have one link down here under who, because we're going to nest another one then. We'll get to that in a minute. But we can do it just like that. And I'm going to start moving a little bit faster, but this actually is in the video for step 2, because I want to get this done. With challenges, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come down. Whoops. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste in there another nested list. And for this one, what we're going to put in here is challenges behind me. And in a link, we do not put spaces. You can, but it's very bad practice and can cause a lot of problems for you. So we use underscores or dashes. I choose to use underscores. Next one is ahead of me. If you notice, again, I'm using all lowercase, and you'll see why. And then under you, we'll go ahead and put our profile and settings. We'll talk more about that then when we get to it. And I'm going to save it and go out and make sure everything looks good. So I have love, who challenges you. Under love, I have things, people. Under who, I. Under challenges, behind me, ahead of me. So I'm going to go up and under things, I'm actually, and we can do this indefinitely, by the way. We can put a list inside a list, inside a list, inside a list, inside a list. Why you would do it, there's actually good reasons why you might go 15 or 20 deep, but we're not about to experience them. But it's just by repeating what we did with the outer one, right? Is coming in here, and now I'm putting this in, and you're starting to see why indenting your code is very important, because it makes it so much easier to read, right?
Question.
Yep.
How much indented it needs, like 2 and 2 inches, 5 inches, or just doesn't matter?
Enough to,
Make it
right. The average is four spaces or 1 tab.
Okay.
And honestly, we'll get into that in the next class, you know, because we dive a little deeper and get a little more anal about things. And so in Web 115 is where we talk about turn your tabs off. And in these different tools that we use, it allows us to say, when we hit the tab key, actually put X number of spaces, because spaces are processed better than tabs are. And don't worry about that, but right, you don't have to worry about that in here. Things, we actually have 4 things that we want under things. So I'm just going to copy and paste. And we're going to put music, movies, books, websites. And of course, I'm just going to go copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Under people, I'm going to copy my things. And under people, I'm going to create another list. And so for people, we only have 3 items, and it's going to be familia, friends. How do you say friends in Spanish? Amigos. How do you say books? What's that? Libros? Libros. How do you say others? Otros. Otros. Yep, everything looks good. So let's all go out to Agabus Hosting. And I'll go ahead and just do it for the sake of the video. I go to agabushosting.com. And up here's my sign in. It should say sign in. And I log in. So let's go to our hosted domains. So I'm in this window. I'm at my hosting, and I went to my domains, hosted domains. Mine is insideoutproject.com with dashes in it. And our domain should be inside-out-html.yourdomainname.com, correct? Just because I'm in here, I'm going to do this real quick. I clicked on that subdomain, and I opened up this domain information box. It's just a simple way of clicking on it, and there we are. And that's what we should see right now. If you did your assignment, you should see Inside Out HTML. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to Files, File Manager, and we're going to go into our inside-out-html your domain name, right, folder. So Files, File Manager, Inside Out. And this is the folder that holds your website. That's basically what that is. Not basically, that is what it is. let's go ahead, that index.html file that we created, highlight it and delete it. And when you do that, if you come out here to your website, which we opened in another tab, you should basically just see that index of, right? Go back to the tab. You're in your folder. You can see that you're in your folder right here. And right here, you can see that you're in your folder. And we're going to upload new file. And we're going to browse out for that file. It should, oh yeah, okay. There's an image folder in there. I'm going to select the file that I just did. And you can do this even if you didn't get all the way or whatever. You can do this because then it'll be there for you to work with. And I'm going to say upload it. And now when I go out here and I refresh, I see the work that I started on. We're going to do one more thing. We don't want people coming and seeing our page or search engines picking up our page or anything like that, right? At least not right now. We're in development. And especially those of you that embrace this project, you might not want your mom to see it, right? Because part of the idea of this project as we get rolling is take a deep dive into yourself. I call it web therapy. It's silly, whatever, but it gets you emotionally involved in, to me, some of the best therapy is writing, right? Like brain dumping and letting things out from the past and thinking about the future and stuff like that. And to motivate you, hopefully some of you think it's a joke, and that's fine, and you may. But I see it as an opportunity to motivate you to get emotionally invested in learning. And so, I'll ask that as we go through this class that you do take the assignment serious, like when it says, okay, write about 3 of your family members on the family page. Don't bash them, you do whatever you want. Just remember, if you turn it public, they can read it. But it doesn't have to be public. And so that's the point I'm getting at is right here. In Files, if we go to Files and File Manager, and we right-click on our Inside Out folder, we can go down here and we can say Password Protect. And we can add. And this will be in the video, so if you're not, we're out of time. So student is the username, and password should be rack pass, because we all want to be able to get into each other's site. And then you hit add. I'll explain more in the video what's happening here, okay? But if you go out there now and you hit refresh, you get a little dialog box that says, please enter your password. Student, don't be creative. Use student rack pass. I'll fail you for the whole semester if you don't.
What's the password? Rack on it?
Rack pass. So this will keep people out. Not necessarily everyone, because we all know each other's password, but nonetheless, right? We're good.
Question. I have my password as password. Is that okay?
Nope. Go change it.
Okay.
All right, sir? Just because if I need to check your work or something like that, you'll see the bitchy side of me. You know what I mean?